Hi everybody, this is Luiz Maia, and you are watching the Behavioral Economics of Global Affairs. We want to uh, retrieve some of the concepts we have discussed so far, and basically we want a context of what is going on at this last few meetings of ours, okay? So basically we starting talking about the individual behavior. And we described behavior economics. We talked a little bit about the principles of persuasion, how that is not exactly directly related to behavior economics. And we basically went back to the 40s and 50s to retrieve the concept of bounded rationality. Then we discussed much more recent research due to Kahneman and Tversky, in which they talk about dual system, fast and slow, system 1 and system 2. And then we started discussing cognitive biases. So those are tendencies of how our brains behave. And at this point, we still focused on individual behavior, how each person tends to behave in specific conditions, okay? So this is what we've been talking so far. We describe cognitive biases as these tendencies or patterns of systematic errors or patterns of deviations from rationality, what we call pure rationality. Okay, so those can affect decision making, how we form memories, how we shape up our own memories, how we develop certain behaviors, and how basically we conduct judgment on people, on situations, and so forth. So this is important stuff. And remember, cognitive biases are universal. It is true that we can see cultural aspects of individuals affecting, sometimes strengthening some cognitive biases, and sometimes weakening them. Okay, so we want to pay attention to that point. Okay, but cognitive biases themselves, they are not cultural aspects of behavior. They can be emphasized, they can be strengthened, or they can be weakened by cultural aspects of. We talk about bias blind spot, and every one of us who start learning about behavior economics, we tend to think that we are safe, we are good, we understand this stuff, therefore we are not susceptible to the same sort of mistakes. But that's not like that. So cognitive biases are like myopia, right? If you have myopia, you have to use glasses. It doesn't matter, you know that you have some vision problem. You have to, you're still gonna suffer from the problem even though you are aware of them. So psychologists, behavior economists, neuroscientists, they're not better off than anyone else. We still are, we mostly are a little bit more aware of the problem, but we still can make the same mistakes as everyone else, right? And bias blind spot means we tend to think that we are okay and other people are not so fine, okay? Choice supportive biases, it's hard to realize that we make mistakes, and once we make a choice, we tend to favor that choice. We tend to be less critical of ourselves and try to justify our choices. That's a common perspective, and we have to be aware of that. And we finish our last meeting talking about confirmation biases, right? Confirmation bias, just one, sorry. So confirmation bias is the biggest deal here, okay? What happens is that we all have this tendency to search for, or to interpret, or just to focus on things, informations that confirm our own perceptions. So this is a problem. We all tend to think we know what's going on before we independently analyze what's going on just in front of us, okay? So in order to address or to analyze a situation, we start from believing a certain interpretation of that, and then we criticize it. And it's hard to be a good critic. And I like to think that confirmation bias is uh, the fundamental problem that led us to uh, search for scientific methods, right? Science, if you think like that, it's just like a huge mechanism to provide us from not getting the truth or not convincing ourselves that the truth is a preconception. So what science does is to prevent us from making mistakes like confirmation biases, right? Confirmation bias. So this is the big deal, and this is probably the most important of the cognitive bias. We have to understand that a third perspective, a structured analysis of problem, uh, they are all kind of creations in order to prevent us from jumping too fast into conclusions, right? And think we know before we actually analyze situations. So here we have some illustrations. Uh, Homer Simpson is telling everyone is stupid except me. That is obviously the bias blind spot. If you think ivermectin works fine, no need to vaccinate. It doesn't matter how many different circumstances and evidence you can get, you still believe what you want to believe. So this is confirmation bias. And you also have the I'm right, I know I'm right, really sure, really sure I'm right. Well, if you pick this class yourself, then you think you are great, you think that you're doing fine, but you have to be careful. We have to remember that sometimes we make choices and it's hard to criticize our own choices, right? So this is the choice supportive behavior, choice supportive bias. Okay, now let's see some other cognitive biases. First, we have conservatism. Notice this is not related to a political view. It's just the tendency to revise one's belief insufficiently when presented with new evidence. If you have an opinion, if you think you know about something, uh, it is very hard to take in new evidence that it basically destroys our beliefs. So we tend to hold on to what we believe, and that's not a good place to be. You have to be opened up to look at reality at every single day and be ready to be mesmerized by reality. After all, reality is much more complex than our human brain can imagine, right? We also talked about, we want to talk about Dunning-Kruger effect. This is a very interesting, it's one of the most uh, amazing cognitive biases I wanted to talk about. So this is the tendency for unskilled individuals to overestimate their own ability. Você não sabe muito, mas você acha que começou a aprender, já sabe demais. And when you are an expert, and if someone asks you, you will probably say, no, I'm just beginning to understand this stuff. So this is interesting, right? Uh, Unskilled people quickly believe they are on top of things, and if you study something for a long time, you tend to be very skeptical about what you already know. You say, you know what? What I know is that I don't know, right? If you are really an expert on something, you are much more aware of how much you don't know, right? So it's hard to measure the level of your own ignorance, right? This is the big point with Dunning-Kruger effect. We also have this endowment effect, the tendency for people to demand much more to give up an object than they would be willing to pay to acquire it. So if I take this class and I separate you guys in two groups and I say, okay, these 5 of you here, you guys are gonna get a prize. You're gonna get, let's say, sunglasses. All right, this is my gift to you. All of you got sunglasses. So you didn't want, but yeah, you got this prize. All right, I got sunglasses now. And then I tell you, all right, uh, the other half of the class didn't get sunglasses. And I say, okay, you guys, you want to sell them? I can give you 2 reais for each of them, and you can exchange them to someone else. And once you got those, I mean, they were not yours. You were not willing, you were not searching for sunglasses, but once you got, you think you have them. And it's hard to give up something that it doesn't matter. You paid nothing for it. You say, no, no, this is now mine. Oh, yeah, these are great sunglasses, and I wouldn't give them up for, I don't know, maybe 50, 60, 100 reais for something like that. So you're going to be reluctant to give them away after you just received them, all right? All right, so this is a quick diagram to understand Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you compare the level of confidence someone has on his or her own ability, and you have the level of competence that they have actually developed, you can see that from the very beginning, once you start learning something, you already think that you are great, you are an expert, right? But if you keep studying this thing, you realize how complicated it is, and then you tend to adopt this more modest view of your own competence. So it takes a long time before you actually can say, oh yeah, I know this stuff, right? I know a lot about it. And many times, even big world experts on certain topics, they will still consider themselves as just learning, uh, I don't know, students of some very, very complex issues. All right? All right. If you ask your lawyer, oh, do I have a case? Chances are they will say, yes, you do have a case. Even though many times you try to sue someone, you try to take them to court, and you're going to fail, right? So this kind of optimism, uh, it goes alongside Dunning-Kruger effect, okay? We have also framing effect. We have discussed that before, but let me remind you about this. Framing effect is like when people draw different conclusions from the same piece of information depending on how that information is presented, right? Remember when I told you that if you take this pack of meat, ground beef, você pegar esse pacote de carne moída, and it says 25% fat, 25% de gordura. Or if you write the other way around, you say 75% fat-free, 75% livre de gordura. Depending on how you present that information, people will be more willing to purchase or not, right? If you emphasize fat, people will think that it's not good for your health and they won't buy it so much. But if you say it is 75% fat-free, people say, yeah, this is great. Yeah, most of it is fat-free. So this is healthy. Depending on how you present the same information, people will make completely different conclusions and sometimes make different decisions about it. All right. We also have gambler's fallacy, the tendency to think that future probabilities are altered by past events, even in reality, if in reality they are unchanged. So let's take this coin, right? If I throw a coin here and say it's going to be heads and toes. Se eu jogo uma moeda para cima, vai ser cara ou coroa? All right. Let's suppose that I threw a coin and it went 5 consecutive ways heads. Então, 5 vezes seguidas caiu cara. What are the chances if I throw it the 6th time? What are the chances of getting heads or toes? Chance is exactly the same, 50%. But most of the people will think like, come on, 5 heads in a row, there are good chances that the next time will be toes. Então, depois de ter caído 5 vezes cara, as pessoas acham que a chance de eu jogar para cima e cair coroa vai ser maior. But actually, those are independent events. Every time I throw a coin, chances are 50-50, right? 50% para cada. But this thing, gambler's fallacy, you can see it all over stock markets. People see some stocks, they say the price has went down 1, 2, 3, 5 days, and they say it's cheap. I have to buy it. I have to take the opportunity. If it fell 5 times in a row, so there are good chances that I'm going to make lots of money because it will just start going up. And sometimes it's not like that, right? Those may be independent events and it's hard to predict the price of stocks, but still, we believe we know, right? So this is some little jokes about the cognitive biases. Something is 66% empty or something is 33% full. This is the same piece of information, and somehow our brains think those are different information, and we make different decisions depending on how information is presented. And this fellow here, down on the right hand side of your screen, okay, this is the Russian roulette, roleta russa. He has missed 5 times, and then he feels like, oh yeah, I'm in a row. I'm gonna pull the trigger again. It's good, but actually, those may not be independent events. Sometimes we get confused about what are and what are not, which are not independent events, okay? All right, we have hindsight bias, sometimes called the I knew it all along. So when we see something that has happened, we think that that was predictable, that was obvious, and sometimes we actually think we have said that was going to happen, right? So I knew it. It's easy to say afterwards. If someone does, I don't know, maybe a minister of finance, this guy makes a decision and the decision goes bad, everybody will tell you, I knew it. Yeah, it was a stupid decision. And if this guy makes another different decision and things go up, everyone would say, yeah, I told you, that was a good decision. So afterwards, it's easy for us to judge. And sometimes if you go back, you remember objectively, some of those choices were hard to be made, right? And you are not sure when you make the choices. We have hyperbolic discounting, and that's very similar to present bias. It's the tendency for people to have a stronger preferences for more immediate payoffs relative to later payoffs. So when things are too far in the future, we think they are not important. So many people don't save for retirement until they get to 50 years old. It can be too late. As pessoas não costumam pensar em fenômenos que estão muito distantes no futuro. E aí eles podem se arrepender quando já é tarde demais. O exemplo mais clássico disso é a poupança para aposentadoria. Se você não pensar antes, você pensa, está muito distante, eu ainda tenho 25, eu ainda tenho 28 anos, vou deixar para pensar nisso depois e tal. Hyperbolic discounting means that you care much more about things that are happening now, the things that will happen next year, and maybe a couple of years after that. But you just don't even think about something that is 5, 6, or 7 years along the road, okay? All right, so when this lady here is thinking about, should I eat the cookies or should I be ready for summer? I want to be fit, or I don't know, you got the idea. So this is hindsight bias. And then the other fellow here is saying, we knew that already. Seems like we didn't need to do the research after all. Again, after all, we all look back and say that was obvious. So this is the hindsight bias, okay? All right, we have these three last fellows here: normalcy bias, planning fallacy, and status quo bias. Normalcy bias, it is the refusal to plan for or to react to a disaster which has never happened before. So last week, people were talking about a tsunami in Recife, right? This was a huge joke. I mean, the chances of a tsunami in Recife, they are very, very small, but still, they were positive. I mean, it was possible. Very, very unlikely, but it was possible. And people just treated this issue as a laughing stock. And they say, oh, come on, this is a joke, right? Tsunami in Recife coming from all over the African coast or something like that. So we don't plan plan for things that have never happened. And that's a big problem if you think about, for example, climate problems, right? But then again, hold on to that thought about climate warming, climate change. Think about planning fallacy. We tend to underestimate the time we will need to complete certain tasks, right? So we leave to study the last 2 hours before a test, or we think that our weekend will be like 124 hours, and we plan lots and lots of stuff for the weekend. Later on, we realize we don't have that much time, right? So we are not good at predicting how much time a certain task will take in the future. So this is the planning fallacy. We have to be careful whenever we make plans, because we tend to be too optimistic. A gente é otimista demais em relação ao tempo que a gente vai levar para completar uma determinada tarefa. And we have status quo bias, o viés do status quo. We tend to like things to stay relatively the same, and changes make us uncomfortable, right? So we don't like to be talking so much about change. We get frustrated, we get scared about a changing environment. So these three fellows here together, they explain how poorly our societies have reacted to global warming. I mean, the amount of evidence gathered so far is overwhelming. We are very, very sure that something really big is about to happen. We can see how much less rain we have in many places. We have big fires destroying forests all over the world, and we still react to this global warming and say, Oh no, this is a natural phenomenon. This is gonna be over soon. It's okay. It's not a big deal. So the three uh, cognitive biases help us understanding how people have a very hard time to understand and to react to such huge changes. All right. Now I want to finish this class here, this recorded session, indicating, recommending, suggesting you a couple of things. First, this article in Harvard Business Review, how we can outsmart our own biases, right? So it's not an easy task, but we have some clues on how we can prevent ourselves from making predictable mistakes, all right? And then we should also listen to this extraordinary fellow here, Daniel Kahneman. He talks about why we make such bad decisions about money and what we can do about it. So you have both links there. Please enjoy this uh, additional material. And thanks for watching this. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.